Well then, on this World Day for Decent Work, Cosatu and its affiliates have staged a national stay away and have been holding several marches around the country. Observers say this is an opportunity for lawmakers to grapple with policy making around the economy in particular. Let's take this further then with Isobel Frye from the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute. Isobel, always good to see you. Welcome to Newsweek PM. So today's march, how significant is it in as far as pushing and putting pressure on both government and the private sector to actually do something more real than just summits in turning the economy around?
Makila, I think you ask a really good question, and I think that the people who are out on the streets today are calling attention to a crisis which is unparalleled in South Africa's history. What we're facing right now is an expanded unemployment rate of 44%. And a narrow definition rate of 34%. But if we look to the characteristics of these millions of people who are not employed, we need to take stock of what the demand is. Of the unemployed, basically 90% have not had further training and education. So we're dealing with a question of what to do and how to incorporate over 18 million people who are not in employment, education and training, whose skill sets are such that it means that they cannot walk into a job tomorrow. And as the labour federations are saying today, what is to be done with people? How do we ensure that people's needs are met and that people are incorporated as vibrant, dynamic members of the economy? Now, this draws to attention the whole concept of decent work, because part of the decent work, according to the International Labour Organization, is the concept of social security. Now, SPY, my research organization, next week is launching an innovative research report that looks at the question of the affordability of a basic income grant. And the argument that we make in that report, having done the econometric modeling, is that if you introduce a universal basic grant of 1,335 rand, you automatically, firstly, take every person out of poverty in South Africa, because that's a poverty line. Secondly, on a basis over 3 years, we're effectively looking at a GDP increase of 5% in year 1, 3.7% in year 2, and 4.8% in year 3. And none of the policies the government has on the table comes into that. And on that GDP growth, we're looking over this 3.7. We're putting this on the table is that we haven't seen anything apart from negative responses that say we can't do things. This is a research report that shows exactly how we can. And we are looking forward to engaging with people because, as I said at the beginning of this interview, we're in a crisis and people are not putting food on the table. People are going hungry, and hungry people need to have something to look forward to in terms of hope.
So the debate around the implementation of a basic income grant, as you well know, is now decades old in the country. It was revived this year in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Would you say that that is possibly the easiest way in which we can right the economic situation in the country?
Before we embarked on this research at the beginning of the year, there were a couple of issues that we wanted to explore. We wanted to explore the affordability and, secondly, the impact, because we know that it's a no-brainer. If you give people money, they'll be able to spend it. But the extent of the impact and the immediacy of the impact was not something that we were anticipating. So our research has shown that literally from the first month, it will start generating not only meeting humanitarian needs, but because of the multiplier of the spend. And we looked at a multiplier between 1.5 and 2, which is a conservative ranking compared to what some of the earlier research was showing. We're certainly looking at the ability to turn around the economy. And I think one of the things that we've been looking at in terms of talking to other people, we've been talking to the CEO of Telkom, Sipho Maseko, we've been talking to former President Kgalema Motlanthe, whose foundation is now taking this on board, and a number of leaders within the business sector as well as the trade union sector and civil society, is within a couple of months, the entire society of South Africa will be changed. What we're looking for is that solution that gives people hope. And what we are asking in terms of people's ability to embrace and go forward is, let's imagine that every person in this country is given 1,300 rand and is able to spend it in your immediate environment. There is very little way that this money could ever be taken up through corruption, that this money could be lost through maladministration. There is very little argument against this as being the significant policy that we need to have in terms of our democracy.
Well, Isobel, government will say it is trying. I'm looking at the Ramaphosa administration specifically in the last, 3 to 4 years since that conference by the ANC in 2017. We've seen an investment summit. There's been a job summit. Just this morning, the president was speaking about the economy and what government is doing to try and fix the situation. Yet we're seeing, as you rightly pointed out, unemployment reach record highs. People are also losing an interest or any faith in finding work. So how effective have those interventions, those summits been?
I think to be head of government must be a very difficult job, and many of us look to support that. And we hope that the contribution that we make is significant and is taken on board. So we do need to be talking to investors. We do need to be looking at medium to long-term investments. The question, Temekile, that we need to ask is, are we looking for the correct investments? What we don't want are investments that do not share the growth. So I think one of the decisions that needs to be made is, how do we invest in people as well as infrastructure? And that's the first question. The second question is, how do we reassure foreign investors particularly, but also South Africans who've seen the violence that happened in July, who know the kinds of concerns amongst people within our own families who are unemployed, that things are going to get better. And as you said, people are tired of talk, people are tired of summits, and people are tired of sort of small and yana types of policies that are not sufficient to address the scale. Now, we've been involved with a number of consultations hosted by government departments around what we would call too small policy interventions. So there's talk about interventions which would be much cheaper, which would be targeted. But from the analysis that we've done, the crisis is widespread. You can't say it's just a youth unemployment. If you look at 15 to 24-year-olds, 1.5 million people unemployed. Then 25 to 34-year-olds, 3.1 million, 35 to 44, and 2.2 million people. So as I go up, we can see that the extent of the crisis is universal, and the solution needs to be universal. We need to ensure that nobody falls out. We call, policymakers call it errors of exclusion, that unintended pockets of people are falling out. And that's what's happened in the past. As we've tried to give sort of small responses to a huge problem, the people that we exclude are larger than the number of people we include.
Let me ask you this
right
then.
Now,
pardon me for jumping in, but we're running out of time. One of the things that keeps coming up in the conversation about South Africa's economy and investment is about our labor regulations. There's still the argument that labor unions, which today we're seeing Cosatu lead this national stairway, needs to ease up the pressure and demand less, that we need to ease some of the regulations around pay, for example, basic income for workers, in order to make South Africa more attractive for possible employers. Do you agree with that?
Temekile, I'm also a National Minimum Wage Commissioner, and I think if you look at the cause behind what you're saying is, people are saying we want to be able to exploit workers far more than they're exploited right now. The minimum pay for workers is not even a living wage. The minimum wage does not equate to being a living wage. And in fact, the Commission is debating this right now. For people to say that we should reduce the incomes to workers, we're effectively saying we want to go back to apartheid slave wages. No one in their right mind could defend that. What we need to be saying is people need to be paid decently. Those who are unemployed need to have certain other ways of supporting their income so that we can become a better South Africa. So what we are saying is basic income guarantee for a better South Africa, and that includes people who are underemployed, people who are getting paid less than they should be doing. We need to turn this around so that within 5 to 10 years, we have a country that we look back today and we say we made the right choice going forward.
Isobel Frye, always great to speak to you. Thank you for your time as always.